This week on the UnAmplified podcast.
Hello, Africa. Hello, world. Welcome to another episode of the UnAmplified podcast. My name is Cynthia Mbamalu, your host. And with me today, as always, we have our amazing co-host.
Hi, Cynthia. Hello, Africa. I am Chi, and I am the cool one. Welcome.
Cool one indeed. And
hello, everyone. I am Queen C. Wide, coming with the vibes. Welcome to the UnAmplified podcast.
Yes, and today we have a powerful guest. Before we pull this one, Chi, you know now, we've been trying to pull her.
Like,
she's been traveling. She works with like the big people in the world, you know, lawmakers, parliamentarians. So she's hardly on ground. Finally, we get to have her on the show.
Finally. I've been looking forward to sitting on this couch.
Welcome, Yetunde Bakare. Yetunde Bakare is our guest today. It's good to have you on the episode.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome, Yetunde.
Yes,
you're
Thank
welcome.
you. The cool one and the one with the
Vibe.
I come with the energy.
And the energy.
Yes,
interesting combination.
I know. Last episode we were discussing gender dynamics. We're looking at puberty, intimacy, and the cost of being a woman, the cost of being a man.
Yeah.
Today we're talking education, everything education, and in between. Yes. Let me even start this with a question. Where did you school? Anyone who wants to go? Your tertiary education.
So I don't have to say where I schooled. I just have to say what I am, and then you can take a guess.
Oh Lord!
So I'm a super lioness.
Excuse me.
Does that ring a bell?
No, it doesn't.
Oh, haters. Okay, I went to the University of Nigeria in Nsukka. It's one of the federal universities in Nigeria.
Yeah, and they call you people the lion and the lioness.
Oh yeah, and then once you graduate, you become the super lion or super lioness.
So, really?
Okay.
That's how we roll.
Yeah. Where did you school?
So I graduated from the University of Jos. For my degree.
Yeah, the only university in Nigeria.
Yes.
Great Josai.
Great.
Haters.
Too much pride.
And then for my master's was it's from the University of Lagos.
Oh, okay. Nice. You?
I'm a great Madonite.
Which one is Great Madonite?
Rich kids.
Oh yeah, right.
I can't even relate. No.
I think Madonna University is one of the cheapest private schools.
Oh, really? Okay. I
know it's actually the cheapest.
Is that an assumption? I mean,
did you do what data? You know, you always train this every time.
70%.
70%. Like, which data source is that?
For my data source.
For your data source. Anyways, what was education? I went to uni just obviously. You can tell. You can tell. I mean, this greatness.
2/4 of the people in the room, just sides. Wow.
Okay.
Yes, you are a lion. I'm not from the zoo.
Oh my God!
This one enter. 1-1.
Anyway, yeah, but for my masters, I went to Central European University. What was education like? And I'm going to focus on. I mean, obviously, I want to talk education in Nigeria because we're looking at education in Nigeria and even Africa. So, what was education like for you?
So for me, I grew up in Lagos.
Okay.
I was born in Lagos. I grew up in Lagos. And I'm traveling to actually choosing the University of Jos.
Yeah, because
it was like the first choice for me.
Wow.
Why? I mean, I was very curious about the North growing up. All we knew then was just Yoruba and Igbos. And then when you go to open places and you have interactions with Northerners, they seem to be the most friendliest, the most kindest. So I was curious about, the North. So I chose the University of Jos, and my second choice was University of Maiduguri.
Oh, wow.
As my second, yes, I actually did want to go to the North. And I was very, very young. I was so young when I got into university. That when I got admitted, my mom had to travel with me. I did not like it. Mom, I'm sorry. I did not like it. I did not like it because, it's your first time outside of your parents and you just want to experience it by yourself. Even though he provided some sort of security for you, my mom was in the hostel with me.
Wow.
Helped me set up my bed space. And so I wanted to be a babe. Like, no, I can handle it myself. Even though I was so young. But I mean, having my freedom for the very first time, I wanted to sort of implement that freedom by myself without guidance from my parents. My mom would go with me to go do my registration, and I saw like other people without their parents. So it just felt like, oh, this is such a mommy's girl.
Your street cred was falling.
Exactly. So it was very interesting. Over the course of the 4 years, I made very good friends that were still friends up until this moment. We had very good lecturers, and sadly, one of our lecturers who recently passed, Professor Jowett, who took us courses on diction, intonation.
Wow, he's so resting.
Amen. And I mean, having a British teach intonation and diction was very interesting.
It seemed like you had fun in school, because it's like you're just talking. I'm like, cool. I want to be you at this point.
That's very strategic to have a British guy.
Yeah, I mean, teach English language.
I mean, uni just because at school there, and we do have really experienced lecturers. And I think it's not just for uni, but I'll come to Queen Sue, because you went to a private university. What was it like? And because you think that's given us the fun, sweet, cool part. Now I'm thinking now things around quality, or was it conducive for you?
So for me, I cannot really relate to all these people complaining for things and they will not get what they want.
Wow.
My school, we were so... They answer us immediately. If you apply for anything, maybe your script is not being marked well, or your score, what you get is not what they are posting on the notice board, or a lecturer is disturbing you, or a lecturer is not even teaching well, they can actually report the lecturer.
And something will be done.
Yes. If a lecturer is giving a textbook and is trying to like increase the prices, if he's up to like more than 2,000, that's even the benchmark, the lecturer will be sanctioned.
Wow.
So we can actually lay a complaint. Within 1 week, you get your answers immediately.
Wow, that's interesting. That's quite impressive, because I mean, yes, just for all our greatness, we had a lot of challenge. But let me come to you, Chi. What was it like?
The opposite of what she just said. I mean, I went to UNN, and for a federal university, we are quite known for whatever legacy and all that. But then I know there is no, in our constitution, or is it in the school policies, you have the option of asking for a remark, but nobody has ever asked for that, at least anybody that I know of, because you can ask for it, and then the lecturer could see it as you trying to say that he's not doing his job well, and then there could be something else that will come out of it. I remember I had a friend who had to, and I'm sorry if this is bad, but then I had a friend who had to defer his admission, or defer one of his years, because he confronted a lecturer. The lecturer didn't like it. The lecturer had to fail him and got his friends to fail him too. So this boy completely failed every course that semester, and then he had to, and they told him he's not going to graduate until he apologizes, until the lecturer decides to let him go.
Wow. So because that was the height of intimidation and abuse, and I think this is one case, but I know these kinds of cases exist where students make demands, rightfully so. Perhaps some simple as, sir, there was a miscalculation in my scores, or there was a miscalculation in my scores, and then most times lecturers get surprised. I remember when I went for my master's, one of the culture shocks I had was the fact that first my professor was like, when I was like, sir, it's like, no, sir. Call me by name. I'm like, sir, I can't call you by your name, because faculty of law, or normally in law, the seniority, you cannot come and be calling your lecturer by their name, or they talk, you argue with them and debate with them. So it was weird to me to see like other foreign students debating and arguing with professors. I'm like, this is so, that was weird. And the fact they'll tell you, because when you talked about this evaluation stuff, I remember in school, then you also evaluate your professors. And it was the major culture shock for me, the fact that my professors were like my friends. They invite you, go to the office to talk about the course. If you don't understand something, you can ask for extra time to have conversations around. You will
not be scared of any kind of sexual harassment.
It took me probably months to adjust to not calling them sir and my, because my mind is like, you're sir, you're ma'am, sorry, you're my prof. Anyways, so as we're just talking, I was thinking around, because today we're discussing education basically. And I remember when I was in school, I don't know if the case has changed. I mean, as simple as power supply, they claimed we had a generator one time before I came in. So I can see the gen, but the gen never worked till I left the hostel. And I remember reading at night. I mean, I'm sure most courses, but in law we read a lot.
We play a lot in our
I see, my friend, if you're not learned, you're not learned. Please, let's not even get into it. So, like I was saying, so it was like a lot of times once power is interrupted, you're either getting your rechargeable lamps or your candles, which was why one time burning candle was used. It was basically the metaphor for your reading all night.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking around the state of education. What's the state of education? I mean, when you were in school, at least I know most of us we've been out from the tertiary institution for a while. What was it like, the state and level of conduciveness?
During my time, because I mean it's been aeons now.
Yeah.
I can't. I mean the Gen Zs, I can't relate. So during my time at the University of Jos, was it conducive? Yes, it was. I stayed in the students' hostel in Abuja hostel. So it was conducive in the sense that I've always been lucky to be paired with roommates who are very studious. So everyone would wake each other up to read when we have exams. You just need to tell your roommates, I have a test tomorrow, I have a test this week. So I've always been very, very lucky. And also the general well-being, security was not a problem. I mean, looking at the location of Abuja hostel at the time, I mean, it was surrounded by very thick forest. I mean, behind the hostel, but we never had any security threat. And the only time that there was a security threat was during the Jos crisis. That was a defining moment for me.
Yeah.
Because
don't forget the crisis.
What I had hoped to do was to serve in Jos and then relocate permanently to Jos.
Oh wow.
But the Jos crisis was just a turnaround for me. I mean, we saw things. We saw things during the crisis. I mean, it was traumatic at the time, and I'm just grateful for my parents, who just, finish and then come back to Lagos. So going back to Jos has not really been a thing for me anymore, because there's that fear that the crisis can start again.
Yes.
Because the way it started
I
then.
want to ask a question.
Yeah.
So during the crisis, was it also affecting students inside the campus?
Yeah, you have to shut down the schools.
Yes.
We always would lose students. Because
When you say lose, you mean die?
Yes.
Like
Because-
they come inside the school hostel.
So remember our campus now.
Yes,
The
the way
day it
it's built.
started, it was even it was during the week, and students were in school. A
One of
lot
those-
of
yeah,
students
are
actually died from that
from that
crisis. Some
because-
are missing till
till
this
date.
day because they've just walked into the hands of the rioters at the time, and up until this day they can't find them. So that was a very defining moment for me. But for the quality of education that I got from the University of Jos, I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity and for the kind of lecturers that we had. Because when you think about a course like English language, you just wonder, what are they teaching them? Are they just teaching them to speak? But the fact that we had to take courses from other departments as well, from mass communication, I think we even had elective from law as well.
Yes, you always have to
So,
have
I mean, it just provided
I think
us
I took
with...
one with you people.
Yes, we had law students also coming into our department. So we had a well-rounded sort of education, which I'm certain is still happening now. I'm hoping that is what is currently still in place. Our lecturers are, they go beyond for the students. I remember one of our lecturers, Dr. Amaka, who introduced us to the concept of feminism.
Yes, I want to talk about her because she was one of those first people I knew.
Yes.
She took Nigerian literature.
Yes, Nigerian literature.
Yes,
Nigerian literature as well. He introduced us to feminism very, very young. So imagine undergraduate 300 level at the time.
I'm thinking,
Yes.
the way you're praising the lecturers, I think it was for then. I don't think it's happening now.
It could be,
but I think there are different stories from different experiences. Sometimes you get it lucky, you have like nice lecturers. Sometimes we get it poorly and you have horrible lecturers.
Yeah.
I had some good lecturers that inspired me. I also had those that I dreaded. I couldn't be like I couldn't wait to be done with their course. You know, there's some people who are like, I can't wait to be done with this course.
I had that experience, and funny enough, that experience was during my master's, not even during undergraduate. I never had the carryover in my undergraduate level, never. But you see that master's, there's a professor that just his name alone, people just have the assumption that you're failing the course. Everybody's failing the course. Everybody's failing the course.
I also have that experience in my university. There's a particular lecturer, a female lecturer, I don't want to call her name. It's just as if she doesn't even know what she's teaching. Like, she comes and pour the same, like, read to the through her textbook, and that's all. Exams still, she picks from the textbook like that and just the whole paragraph and just fix it there and just be like, you should just explain what she was there. Like, just explain it.
Like you said, sometimes you get it well, sometimes you get the bad ones. I also had a mix of the good and the terrible teachers, the terrible lecturers, because I know there were some lecturers who were willing to go all out. They were really smart. You could tell that, oh, this is someone who finds passion in what they teach. And then we all had the ones who was very notorious for repeating the same notes. So the same notes she had for
3
years ago it's the same one that, like, so the class started and we're like, oh, okay, let's start. She was calling her, and she doesn't teach, she just dictates. So she started dictating, and we wrote like first paragraph, and someone told me, don't bother writing, I have the notes. I said, what? My friend brought out the book, so apparently she already got it from someone from the previous set, and we brought it. I was verbatim. So we just relaxed in the class. You only come to the class because you have to sign attendance. So there were lecturers like that, and in those cases you just you know that you're not learning anything. You're just filling in for the attendance.
Anyway, so now, because we're having this question around this, one of the things I wanted to talk about is the conversation around the Student Loan Act. So, you know, the Student Loan Act, access to higher education, was signed by the president into law June this year. And that's actually one of the first bills to sign into law post its inauguration. And I know that was trending online for a long period of time, because the idea is an act to provide interest-free loans to students.
Education is a very important aspect of our country.
I'm not an educational expert, or perhaps a legislative expert.
That's what
he works with the national and state assembly and parliament in Africa. Well, yes.
Please, I don't have money, so anyone who's watching this video,
it's not the money, it's the brain, baby.
Okay, so back to the conversation on the Students' Loans Act. So like Cynthia rightly said, it was signed in June by the president. And what it just seeks to do is to provide interest-free loans for students of tertiary institution that covers for only their tuition. And the loan, it's not free money, right? What the loan does is, what the act does primarily is that it establishes the Nigeria Education Loan Fund, which is where the funds for providing these loans to students will be domiciled. And by the act, what it says is that students would have to repay the money, and the method for repayment is not clear. What the act currently provides for is that students will pay back the loan 2 years after
graduation.
No, not after graduation, after they've been deployed for the National Youth Service Corps scheme. And there are gaps within that already, because it's based on the assumption that people who leave the scheme would get jobs after 2 years. Because there are people who after 2 years do not get any job, do not run any business, and they just do, just side hustles that gives them some money. And what the act also provides for is that for those who are employed, they would have to deduct 10%. Their employer will have to deduct 10% from their salary
and remit to the federal government to repay for the loan. While for those who are self-employed, it will be 10% of their profits that would be their profit every month would be remitted to pay off their
maybe
loan.
Just to ask now, so what category of students? So is it any student that can approach the government for that particular loan?
What the act provides for is students in federal universities, state universities, in polytechnics, in vocational schools are the ones that are covered for this loan.
So people like
no
them,
private. So my people in Madonna
private
universities,
but
What if
private
the
universities.
state students have a spillover?
so now these are some interesting questions that you've raised. And so one thing that the Act has done is to exempt students from private universities. It also does not provide for what category of students. Is it only undergraduates? Is it those who are postgraduate students? Is it masters? Is it PhD? It just covers for students, and that's very blanket, right? And it's based on the assumption that those who attend private universities are from wealthy home, without taking into cognizance of some factors that actually drive students to go to actually attend
to
private
get
universities.
admission.
Yeah.
Admission is one of it.
Some
There's the
people
unending strike
Exactly.
by ASU.
Even the poor facility.
Let me use myself for an example. I wanted to go to Abuja University, so the admission was not coming forth. It was just taking the necessary time, and when it even came, they gave me CRS. So
Christian religious studies.
And I just had to go to a private school. I just had to
because I mean that's
school.
also because the truth is our federal and state universities can't even take everyone student because if you think of the number of students leaving high school every year across the country, that's a large number. And so in my mind, I'm also thinking that some people who opt for private universities, it's not necessarily because they are wealthy. It could be that they've tried to get admission. And you also know the admission factor. These days, you also need connection to even get into the federal universities or even the state universities. So you have people who wait 4-5 years post high school and they have all their exams, everything, just admission. Because I'm also thinking, how can this loan, wouldn't it have made sense if this loan is open to, let's say, the general term, indigent students, provided you have admission, and then there'll be other guidelines to regulate access.
Yeah, so to assess the loan, one of the criteria is that you must have admission.
Okay.
So you must have an admission letter into any university. And that the annual income of your family should not be less than 500,000.
Should not be less or should not be more.
It should not be less than 500,000, I believe. So it can be, it should not
Not
be
be
more
more.
than
Oh,
500,000.
okay.
Yeah, it should not be more than 500,000.
And
you have to get 2 guarantors, which is also a problem because the one of the guarantor must be a civil servant who must have attained level 12 in the civil service. You must get a lawyer who must also have attained 10 years post-call. Justice of peace. I mean, a lawyer can help us to define who is justice of peace. Justice of peace, because that was not even explained in the act on who the justice of peace is. So if I have access to a civil servant who would sign my guarantor form at level 12, how much is my tuition? Because we also need to ask these questions. Because in some federal universities, tuition is less than nothing. What actually takes the
because
bulk?
that's the question I wanted to ask. If you look at when we pay our fees, can you remember how your fees was broken?
Yes, so I remember in my first year I paid around 60-something thousand, and towards the final year, naira, and towards the final year I paid around 20-something thousand naira, and I know that this was nothing compared to what I'm actually spending in school.
Yeah,
My
but if you even
pockets.
look at the breakdown, so when you make your payment, because I had to. The other time I reached out to get a screenshot of University of Lagos. They increased their fees to 100 and something thousand naira. But when you look at the breakdown, if you look, actually tuition was nil.
It's true.
But there are other charges. So there are other things that
I
make
know
up
there's
the school fees.
security, there's something
Hazard.
about bursary.
There's
hazard.
medical, there are so many things listed. For private schools, I remember I looked at that for, I think, is it Bingham? I also saw that they pay, 900,000 plus, but the tuition was like 600. So for one of the ones I saw 600,000 plus. There were other things. So it shows that even school fees in itself, if we say only tuition, it means why are we collecting the loan? Because tuition is usually small.
Exactly.
There are other things that make up the school fees. So
Exactly. Which is an interesting point because like you rightly said, tuition is very minute compared to the other fees that you need to pay. There's the accommodation as well.
Feeding,
There's feeding,
transportation,
and all of that. There's just quite a lot. And the Act does not states the mode of repayment. The House of Representatives set up an ad hoc committee to gather stakeholders' feedback and their input on the act. So let's not forget that this law is already in existence, right? It's already a law. But giving the sort of feedback that has come from students themselves, who are the direct beneficiaries of this legislation, ASU as well, NASU, the Central Bank of Nigeria, and that's an interesting point I'll come back to on the role of the Central Bank of Nigeria in this. So it became important for the committee to hear from the stakeholders on what their thoughts are on the bill, which was very interesting. At that summit, there was a senior lawyer who said that I think between the 1960s to 1984, there was a student loan in existence.
Okay.
Right? But there was a decree by the federal government, I think in 1984 or thereabout, that sort of put an end to that student loan. So it's not new.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? So it put an end to that loan. And at the time, there was no clear plan on how to pay. So you give students this loan, but it becomes a problem on how to pay back. And this senior lawyer had said that he's owing the federal government 1,500 naira. That was the loan that he took at the time. And he has been trying to pay back this loan. And someone just jokingly told him, like, 1,500 then is not at the same value now. So we should be talking about maybe 1.5 million that he should be paying back to the federal government. And this act, as it is presently, does not also provide how this repayment should be done.
Wow.
So you give people loan, you don't tell them how to return. So which is the interesting point about Bayelsa. So Bayelsa has the Bayelsa Higher Education Loan Fund.
Okay.
So what their own act provides for is that students can negotiate. So if you can afford to pay your loan after NYSC, or maybe a year after NYSC, you can go to them and say, I want to pay the bulk of my loan.
Okay.
You don't want to spread it.
It gives you that
freedom to actually choose. And their own guarantor system is more enabling. So you can bring your parents as your guarantor. Okay. Because the idea of a guarantor is if you're unable to pay the loan, they will hold your guarantor responsible. And what the act that was passed, that was signed by the president, also did not take cognizance of, is we have the Japa syndrome.
Yes, because I can collect loan, finish school, and I'm out.
And you're out.
And they're waiting for you to finish NYSC and start paying.
Yeah, and they don't know that you have moved to Canada.
Exactly. Yeah. So these are government's money. This is also another gap as well, because if you have to think about the current state of the country, what's the educational context, what's happening within the education sector. People are migrating for better lives using the study route. But if I'm owing the federal government and I relocate, how do I repay the loan? And some suggestions has been, you can use the BVN, you can use the NIN, because these are things that your NIN perhaps will be used for renewing your passport, right? So even at the port of departure, you can be flagged that you're owing the federal government. So if you don't want them to stop you from boarding your flight, then ensure that you pay your loan. And the point on the central bank. So what the act provides for is that it creates a special committee, and that the governor of the central bank is the chair of that committee, and this chair of the committee appoints a secretary. So you're giving someone a discretionary power to appoint someone, and the president, who is supposedly supposed to be the one to appoint these people, because if you give the power to the chair and the secretary in every committee setup,
we don't trust each other, and they will only their children will get this loan. Number one, the main people that even need the loan, the indigent students, will not have access.
I mean, I usually look at this thing with
transparency
and hope that transparency will take place, because the purpose of this is to ensure that those who cannot afford to fund their education have access to this loan. And in the composition of that committee, one thing that we also noted was that the students who are the beneficiaries of the loan are not even part of the committee. So you have there's no representative of students. There's no representative of non-academic staff union, because one way that the committee can also monitor how this funds is being used is that they are also monitoring the academic records of the beneficiaries of this loan, and who will be providing you with that is the non-academic staff, not the academic staff. And it also needs to be very clear on the amount that the students can actually take as a loan, and at what level. Is it at the entry level, which is 100 level? Is it at the 200? Is it 300 or 400 level?
Is it a yearly affair?
Or is it a yearly affair, right? So that is not even stated in the act. So that's also one of our recommendation. And one of our recommendation as well is the annual income of 500,000, right? And what's the minimum wage in Nigeria? If you do the calculation of the minimum wage in Nigeria, for one individual, it's not even up to 500,000
in a year, right?
In a year,
yeah. So,
well, you said it's for less than 500,000.
It should.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
should not be more than. Should not be
So
more
you're
than 500,000.
So that's why. So because the idea is you reduce that, because if someone's annual, if let's say minimum wage is 30,000 currently, 30,000 naira, 30 times 12, it's like 360,000.
The point is, if it's 320,000, where's the data on those who are even earning that? If you look at those who are in the informal sector, for example, right?
How do you calculate
their annual income? Those who earn daily, how do you calculate their annual income? Except those mechanisms and indices are in place. You cannot just make an assumption that only those who earn, they're not paying taxes, for goodness sake. People are taking loans to send their children to school.
Yeah, actually, because when you said 500,000, I know at first I was thinking maybe reduce it, but actually, if it is as long as you earn, only those who earn 500 and below, it also is problematic, because your annual income can be 1 million, but you have more than one child. There's rent, there's feeding, and there's school fees for the other kids. A larger percentage of the citizens too who need support may not be able to access the loan. So now it's all making sense. Before this, we decided to look at what data is telling us around cost of school fees. I would have to just read it, because I'm not good with numbers, so I wouldn't remember all the figures. So in Nigeria, for instance, to go to school or access to the average cost for education, for whether federal and tertiary education, university, is between 45,000 to 104,000 naira. So that gives us roughly $130 something.
Yeah.
However, if you go to the US, the average cost, based on the Education Data Initiative, it's about $36,000 or so. The UK, the data from the British Council is about $27 to $27,000. That's about 21 point something million average cost a year. Now, if you come within Africa, one would say that Nigeria, we relatively are one of the countries that you pay cheaper to go to school,
which is not.
Yeah, it's not a
they
good
don't
thing.
Invest more.
So now that's the point. I'm getting into the cost now. So for me, perhaps not necessarily about the financial costs, because it seems we're paying cheaper, and I'm not saying we shouldn't pay cheaper, because it's not necessarily about the cost but the quality, because it's one thing to get education cheap, but can you compete with your peers in the world?
I just think the government really needs to, they need to diversify or change their priority. It's not like you said providing better finances for students to access education, but it's also about them building up the federal universities to a level where
federal, state, tertiary,
all tertiary institutions to be at a level where the students can at least compete with their peers from outside. I know we also have this challenge. The peers in private universities, sometimes they tend to have more edge than us, because
in which private university? No, not true. No. I went to federal university. I mean, some people from private university. We will stand our ground. We went to law school. I just realized we're all the same. I'm even better.
I'm coming to it. In all these science courses, they tend to have better functioning laboratories, better lecturers, better policies to address things like harassments, which I know will come to, and every other aspect of education. Then it will have a more robust academic or educational life for the students in tertiary education.
Even expanding our curriculum, right?
Yeah.
So you're not having the traditional or conventional courses. I know that private universities, because my younger brother, when he was about to get into school, he's a typical Gen Z. I could see that the kinds of courses he wanted, the options were better for him for private universities, because federal universities is still a lot more traditional and conventional courses. But what else? How else can we make education
increase in funding in schools? Yeah, because when you if you check other sectors, they fund other sectors more than the way they fund education sectors.
The budget.
You know, when they don't pay teachers well, how will they have the zeal to come and teach you? They might not teach you.
We had those.
Yeah. Actually, no, welfare for lecturers. Because some of our professors, I remember one data was showing like professors end so poorly that for some of them after retirement, they are struggling to even maintain themselves. And so as we're discussing this, because you talked about harassment, University of Calabar has been trending. It was trending online,
for a very wrong reason.
And this is not the first time it's trending. University of Calabar is a federal university in Cross River State, South Nigeria. Who has been following that up? What's the update on that? Or what's been happening in Unical?
I read the story, and it was very sad because as someone who also went to a federal university, I have such stories. So but this one for the University of Calabar is a certain law professor. You love you.
Not you law people, no, please. An abuser is an abuser. It's not about his profession.
True. So this professor, so the girl is telling a story of how the professor harassed her. Okay. So she came to the professor for a complaint, and the man said, "Wait for me here." And then in the end, he ended up raping her. So she runs out, complains. They take her to the hospital. The police even had to do some tests, and then she sued. But then the man went to the court, and because he's a lawyer, unfortunately he's a lawyer, so he brought out all the jargons that exist.
Oh Lord, I'm going to be quiet and listen to you.
And rope himself out of this situation, but he has been suspended.
One of the defining pictures from the students protest was one placard that I saw. We're tired of sucking dicks.
Yes, we have to read it the way the student wrote it. I saw that. Sad. I was sad.
So imagine at what level it would have gotten to for someone student. These are young
female students
to write that on a placard publicly. And what is even more worrisome is the attitude of the accuser. I remember reading one of the news reports where he said nothing is going to happen because he's the first professor of law. Is the accuser that is the first professor of law from the community. Is it from his community? And that nothing was going to happen to him. And the fact that the school authority are aware of the different cases of sexual harassment that has been brought forward by this individual, and you continue to put these students in harm's way by keeping this same person in the school
system,
giving him access to students.
So for me, that's where the worry is, because the question is, how can we make our institutions safer for women and girls?
There was a documentary that was in BBC. I think Thanks for Grades that Kiki Modi, that she had to quit school because of a certain lecturer. In Lagos State University. So as she was working with BBC, she had to make a documentary on it.
I know she covered other countries. So this is not just a Nigerian thing. I know this happens in other countries, right? Other institutions, and it's worrisome. And I'm thinking, how can we make our schools safer for women and girls?
We have fantastic laws. One problem is with the implementation of those laws, and that's for our lawmakers, the governors, the presidents, who are the ones who are sent to this legislation, to also consider that when they campaign, they tell you they are the father of the nation, they are the parents of the nation, but it has to go beyond the word of mouth, but in their action. President Muhammadu Buhari, before he left, did not assent to the sexual harassment bill. So that's a very important legislation that would have changed the dynamics on how students are harassed and victimized in tertiary institution, because that bill provides very stringent punishment for those who are offenders, and it also protects the victim. We also need to take into cognizance that the culture of silence is a very worrisome trend that actually limits, victims of sexual and gender-based violence from speaking up. There's also the fear of victimization. You mentioned the students, who went to report a case of incorrect
and then the
speech, and then the other lecturer
friends
decided to fail this person. So I think that universities also need to take the bold step of calling out and ensuring that offenders who are reported, they do their investigation. And if there is a case, report to the police and let them face the wrath of the law.
Because yes, we have the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act. They should, because when you harass, that is rape, it is sexual abuse. So this should actually, the person, it's not, for me, it's beyond disciplinary action in the school, because this should be properly prosecuted in our law courts. And the person indicted, if found guilty, be sentenced appropriately. Because for me, there's the only way to curb that. And because we're running up the conversation, I was also thinking, are there ways young people can start building alliances and solidarity to support each other in schools?
I like one of the reasons why the Unical case is as popular as it is because the students came together, they started marching for the other students. So I think students themselves need to also come together to support each other. I won't just say the women. I know the men too also can relate.
Some male students also complain.
When I was in school, we had a lecturer like that who I think he's still there roaming the school. Very troublesome human being. And the fact that he even trended one time on Instablog and nothing happened, he still continues to roam the school. So what the guys used to do for us that time is, because they know that this lecturer gropes women. So if you are in his class and you sit at the edge and you are a lady, he's going to touch you inappropriately. So what the men do for us is that they sit at the edges and then let us sit in the middle. So before he can reach you, and then we also walk around with rings on our finger so that you can tell him, oh sir, I'm married. He will now say okay, because he was unashamedly.
This is sad that you have to wear a ring,
it's
or
very,
that
very
the boys
sad.
have to now be protecting. Rather than focusing on education, they have to now be protecting the female students. But I agree with you.
It's very sad. So I think the students, once they start relating to the other students and supporting them in speaking up, it helps. Like this issue of shame and the oath of silence that is very rampant. When you know that your fellow students who are seeing everything unfold will support you, it gives you more courage to speak out.
To speak up, Quincy, why?
I feel students should not also encourage lecturers. Like, most students, when those lecturers make these advances, they also tend to fall for it. I think they should hold themselves and go and report those lecturers. They should speak up.
At the initial stage, once you start seeing the advances,
just be like, don't give them face, don't smile. This is bad. That is bad. So when they start giving those advances, just don't even smile at them, because once you start smiling, they think you are giving them green lights. So they keep on doing it.
I think for students, sadly, is the society we find ourselves. I do believe that we need the bill, and I'm hoping that the 10th Assembly, this is something that will bring back, not just for Nigeria, for respective countries. We need to look for ways to protect our young people, students, both male and female, protect them against harassment and abuse, because it also affects some people. Never recover because you leave school with this horrible experience. Some people quit school just because of harassment, and most times, if you don't think the system will protect you, you also just keep it to yourself. So I do believe that we need the laws, better laws, to protect victims and survivors of violence. But also, we also need to start speaking up and supporting each other. The culture of shaming someone who expresses or shares their problems, I think we need to stop that. I know there was one time one of the students was saying, a lecturer spoke to us, someone was like, you're always, the way you work, the way you dress, you act seductively, so why would they talk to you that way? People have different personalities. Some people are loud and flamboyant and glamorous. It is not an excuse for anyone to abuse them. So I also believe that even as young people, we need to be a lot more supportive of our peers. I heard the story of this male student went to beat up one lecturer that abused a fellow female, their classmates, because they also felt that the system will not provide justice. The only way is to go and threaten him and say, if you touch this girl again, you will not live to tell the story. And it stops it. Now, I don't know how true that story, but sometimes you get some of these stories. But we need a lot more support to protect ourselves in schools, especially for tertiary institutions. And as we're, because we're talking today, I said this education, all about education. Yeah, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, before you give your closing thoughts. And I also think that our institutions need to provide safety nets for victims of sexual and gender-based violence. And I believe that this falls on the door of the vice chancellor of the university, the provost of polytechnics, those who are in the leadership. Because they are the ones who set the tone. If you make an example of one person and they know that in this university they have zero tolerance for this form of abuse against students, there would be no room for such things to happen. And one quick thing they can do is to provide a system that allows students report anonymously.
Yes.
If students are able to, report cases
with evidence.
Even if you don't have evidence, but you are able to report that this person. So if there's a cycle and and there's a frequency in the number of those who report a particular person, then that's a reason to investigate. Because if you don't put such safety nets in place, a lot of students go through these things and won't speak out. But if they know that there is somewhere that they can report and it can perhaps not be traced to them, then perhaps that might also help.
I like this your point, and I think one of these issues is brought about by the fact that, and it's an open secret, that there are cabals in universities. Most of these lecturers belong to one group or the other, whether it's some form of confraternity
or one cult or the other. No, why are we laughing? This is the reality. Because some people believe they are untouchable because of what one thing or the other protecting them.
So when one of the people in this confraternity does something, the rest of the lecturers protect the person, and you will be surprised how far of this whole thing goes. So it could be that the VC himself is also, or herself,
which is why
for me, if we have the law, it means if the school is not answering you can just go to the criminal justice system to take up the matter. And because we're already, time has been well spent, I really do believe that we need to create safer spaces for our young people to learn and to become the best that they could be. And for those who think this is not a serious issue, be careful. You know how they say, today it may not be you, tomorrow it could be someone dear to you. It could be your daughter, it could be your sister, it could be your niece, your nephew, or your brother. Or you. So when you think this is far away from me and you don't want to speak up, or you don't want to support those who are fighting for justice, it could be you next time. And I think it's important we are all a bit more aware to protect ourselves and to ensure that our systems are safe. But most importantly, education. We talked about education already. We need the Student Loan Act to be reviewed. Actually, I do believe that we need that law revised and to take in all of these considerations so that the law can actually serve its purpose. But beyond the law, we need our government. Hopefully, this new government, President Tinubu, there will be better investment in education. Our educational system is dying, it's almost dead. We need to revive that system. The quality of education, our institutions need to be to be better, need to be better built to meet global standards. But that also our lecturers, our teachers are paid better, because if they have better welfare, there'll be better incentives to teach the students. So basically, education can be better, and Nigerians deserve better education. Africans deserve better education. And as we round up, how we do our shout out. I'll start with Queen CY. So
shout out to Fred Coker, shout out to Ifeanyi, our cinematographers.
Yes,
shout out to Odemenam,
director looking at
extraordinary.
Very strange looks. Hi, director.
Shout out to DJ Drexx, our sound engineer. Shout out to Shola.
Yes, so making us look beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
We have Ayo. Thank you, Ayo, for always doing the social media work. And we have Samuel Folorunshaw and Stephen Momo, who help us with our creative designs. And to our guests,
amazing, the powerful,
the wonderful. What's that song? What's that song?
Cynthia,
the emperor, the emperor, the conqueror, the lion is here. Hey, this is the one we're hailing today. Thank you so much, Yetunde Bakare. It's been amazing just listening to you talk about the law and also your experience working on legislation. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
It's our
I enjoyed
honor.
myself.
Yes, and you know what to do. So our amazing audience and listeners, you know what to do. What should they do, Quincy?
Thank you so much
Yes.
for listening to us today.
Yeah.
We cannot wait for people to listen to more of our episodes coming to you every week on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Don't forget to like,
Yes, so
share,
Uh-huh.
comment,
Uh-huh.
and follow us on all our social media platforms
Oh, yeah.
at the UnAmplified podcast.
yeah.
Subscribe.
Yeah,
forget to
subscribe.
Yes, subscribe. Cool one. Talk the subscribe with confidence.
When you watch our videos, make sure you subscribe.
Thank you. Ladies, it's been amazing having you on this conversation today. Education is important. We'll keep talking about education because we believe that education is key to our development. See you next episode. As you know, we always cheers to Africa. When you're on,
You're
amplified.
Cheers.